I think that Mr. Big Voice would be better off if he said where the news meets my opinion, not necessarily yours, because let's be honest, most of the time it's just simply me sharing an opinion and people reacting about all of that. Occasionally people do chime in with an opinion of their own, and I'm not knocking that either. I'm just telling you that's a bit how it sometimes comes across on the air, I'm sure, to a lot of people who are listening. So be it, I'm the one getting the paycheck. I look at it that way. Couple of things coming up a little later in the program today. Just after 9 o'clock news, we are scheduled to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Steve Heil. He has been retired from the Air Force a number of years. He did 20 years. He served during the Vietnam War, of course, and then he served through the 1970s and into the 1980s. He's had an incredible life story. Close friend of Bobby Knight, basketball coach Bobby Knight. Also Mike Krzyzewski, another basketball coach and close friend. That's because Steve was doing some graduate work while he was in the Air Force at the University of Indiana, and he got to know a great many of these people. He's also a friend of Roger Ailes. They were classmates in college at Ohio University. Ailes is the founder of Fox News. Rupert Murdoch, obviously, is the man behind it, but Ailes is the guy who put it together. Steve has also been acquainted throughout the years and worked closely with people such as Tom Clancy, when the two of them were working together on a project to commemorate the 175th anniversary of the Battle of Fort McHenry, and of course the creation of the Star-Spangled Banner, written by Francis Scott Key. He served as well as the administrator of the Shuttle Challenger Commission, working alongside such people as Neil Armstrong and Sally Ride. So he has an incredible background that he's going to join us talking about some veterans issues coming up in the next hour of the program. Also, Dr. Jonathan Tripp scheduled to join us, or one of the doctor's associates, just after 8:30 this morning. We're going to be talking about concussions. And the cause of concussions, we're going to be talking about the treatment of concussions. Lots of things have changed over the years. Of course, we're a lot more, I think, astute when it comes to really the damages that a concussion can cause, and that is because some of the research that has been done in sports-related injuries. So we'll have that discussion. You're also welcome to chime in if you feel like it, and if you've got a medical question or comment for the doctor, please feel free to share that as well. You can give us a call at 736-0300. And I'll point out, we do this every Wednesday with the folks from Tripp Family Medicine on Fillmore Street, right here in Twin Falls, directly across from the main post office. But I wanted to open up the program today with a few minutes talking about the latest in the series of Republican candidate debates. Now, the Democrats have had one of these things, and they won't have another one until sometime in February. Certainly they have far fewer candidates. Two have already dropped out, and one said he would not be running. So that leaves us, I believe, with, well, there was a sixth in there too, but the name doesn't even sound familiar when I hear it. And he has not been invited to any of the debates. So they're down to three candidates, or one with a couple of halves. Maybe it's two if you really look at it that way, because Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley, the party is trying to give them the cold shoulder and get them out of the way. Republicans, what I think that people have failed to recognize this year, the party and the people putting together the debates have been very, very good, realizing there's not enough space on stage, and it's a little cumbersome if you've got 12 to 15 candidates up there. They have decided, Republicans have decided what they should do is split these up into separate debates. So you had an undercard, they call it the kiddie table, as a joke. You had four candidates in the undercard last night, and then you had the other candidates who are higher in the polls, at least at the moment, who are on the big stage. Sometimes, though, the real fireworks happen in what's called the undercard. And I have been reading some reviews this morning. One reviewer said Chris Christie was the winner of that undercard debate. One reviewer that I saw. I saw three reviewers who said not so. They said it was Bobby Jindal, who happens to be one of my personal favorites. He's the governor of Louisiana. And Jindal, in a sense, laid down the gauntlet last night when he was criticizing the Republican Party for being a party of Wall Street and K Street and not necessarily Main Street. If you did not see any of the undercard, got to thank Fox Business Network, too, because I don't have a television at home at the moment, at least not one hooked up. I was able to watch Fox Business coverage live online, and I didn't have to pay a thing for it. This is Bobby Jindal speaking last night.
In Louisiana, we're actually a top 10 state for job growth. As we sit here today, we have more people working in Louisiana than ever before, earning a higher income than ever before. We've had 60 months in a row of consecutive job growth in our state. So the reality is we have diversified our economy. Yes, I've got an energy plan that says all of the above, that creates good manufacturing jobs in America. We've also got one of the fastest growing IT sectors by percentage. We are growing Louisiana's economy. But let me get to the point that is, I think, the most important issue here tonight. You're going to have several hours of debate on the economy, and we're going to have a great discussion about energy plans and tax rates, and that's all great. The most important thing we have to do, we have a fundamental choice to make, folks. Are we willing to cut the government economy so we can grow the American economy? That is the most fundamental question we've got to answer. We are on the path to socialism right now.
You've got to realize people like Jindal likely low in the polls and not attracting a lot of interest from Wall Street or K Street. I hate to say it. I saw a friend write this morning on Facebook that Cruz and Rubio are likely going to be jumping up in the polls, Marco Rubio especially, because he had a very slick performance. But a friend of mine was saying the guy is nothing but a rhino. And actually, if you're a Wall Street tycoon or one of the K Street lobbyists, you're hedging your bets. You want a Jeb Bush or John Kasich or Chris Christie or George Pataki, and if you can't get them, you want someone controllable, you want someone who's going to do your bidding, then you'll go with Marco Rubio. And I think that's the most honest way to put this. Rubio is a Republican and masquerading, I believe, as a conservative. Republican in name only, as a friend of mine called him online this morning, who was doing a review of what his vision was or what he saw last night during the course of these debates. Jindal, according to a writer by the name of Byron York at Washington Examiner, hacked or hijacked the early debate because he was talking about the differences between those Republicans who are out for sale to the highest bidder versus those who are out for the American people. And Christie jumped in and said, no, well, that's, our main opponent right now is Hillary Clinton. To which, of course, Jindal decided it was time to pounce, according to the writer, saying, look, I absolutely agree we've got to beat Hillary Clinton, but just sending any Republican is not good enough. We've had a Republican majority in the Senate and the House. What has changed? So Jindal getting high marks for that response. And then the later debate, I don't know how anyone got a word in edgewise with John Kasich. In fact, he was so bad with his interruptions, I was assuming that he was going to pop into the show this morning and just start interrupting me while I was on the air. The man didn't seem to have any what you'd call governor on him last night. If you're a truck driver, you know what that is. I had an uncle, and they used to put a governor on his truck because he had a habit of being a little lead-footed when he would be driving down I-95 or I-81 and delivering goods down in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So the governor ensured that his truck wouldn't go beyond 68 miles per hour. Well, somebody needed to have, and I'm not talking governor as in political office, Kasich needed a governor of his own to sort of quiet him down while he was involved with all of these interruptions. One of them came about after this exchange. This is the pre-exchange, Neil Cavuto and Ted Cruz. And these two are having a discussion about bank bailouts. Cruz, if you're a true conservative, you don't believe you bail out the big banks and then let, Joe Smith from Main Street go hungry. And Cavuto is bringing this up with Ted Cruz. Take a listen.
Are you saying, sir, that if a Bank of America were on the brink, you would let it fail?
Yes. Now, let's be clear. There is a role for the Federal Reserve. What the Fed is doing now is it is a series of philosopher kings trying to guess what's happening with the economy.
Well, it didn't get much beyond that because Mr. Kasich, the governor of Ohio, thought he had to chime in and defend the big banks.
But at the end of the day...
So you said you'd abandon philosophy and abandon principle, but what would you do if the bank was failing?
Because if during...
What would you do if the bank was failing?
I would not let the people who put their money in there all go down.
So you would bail them out?
No. As an executive, I would figure out how to separate those people who could afford it versus those people or the hardworking folks who put their money in those institutions.
So you've got Mr. Kasich jumping up and ensuring that he's at least going to have more donations coming in from the lobbyists and the big bankers. The lobbyists, there was an interesting story I happened to see last week. Do you know that the third largest lobbying effort now in the country is being made by university systems around the country? True story. I mean, these academics who can't control their own campuses. Pharmaceuticals, of course, are number one. But that was an interesting take. So a lot of people are looking for big pieces of these candidates and having candidates that can do your bidding. I had a friend, he was a conservative Republican. He ran one year for the Attorney General's office in New York State. And I had a candidate from another office on air with me, and I told her that she was getting a lot of money, big money, from utilities. In other words, the power companies and the gas companies, they wanted her as an ally at the state capitol. And she said, well, I'm not aware of that. Well, apparently she wasn't paying much attention to what her campaign was bringing in and where the money was coming from. So I had the records, and I said, well, actually, over the last 5 elections, they've pretty much bankrolled what you do. And after the show, I got in touch with my friend who'd been listening. As I say, he was a candidate once for Attorney General, And he said, you better tell her next time they're not giving her the money just because they like her. They want something in return. That's modern American. Well, I guess it's always been American politics. 17 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 32. Bit of a chilly start to the day. Kasich didn't make any friends when it comes to the people who were watching in a side room. Pollster Frank Luntz was actually holding court with a group of people who were already decided voters, I should point out. And right now, Kasich has pretty good numbers in New Hampshire. These were all people from New Hampshire who were watching. It appears that Rubio swayed many of them, and many of them didn't much care for Kasich. There were audible groans, in fact, as Kasich kept interrupting. But take a listen to the conversation with the pollster and the focus group.
Now, I want to ask you, how many of you switched votes? Some of you came in here supporting a different candidate. Why did you switch?
I switched because I went from Carson to Rubio during this debate, just because I liked his vision for America. I like that he wants to put more money into our military, which I think has been depleted under this president.
Why did you switch?
I was originally supporting Bush, and I switched to Rubio because I liked his passion, I liked his message, his leadership, his vision for the future.
You just made a whole bunch of people very upset down in Bush headquarters. A couple more switched. Tell me why.
I think the biggest reason was he showed some energy. He showed some charisma. He had the ability to connect. Carson's a great guy, but he's just so slow and quiet. And that appeals to a certain group, like the older people.
Or the younger people, because he always reminds me a lot of Mr. Rogers. You remember Fred Rogers from TV, It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood? Wore the cardigan sweater and would always change into his sneakers. 8:19, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning. Some of the comments these people made, well, he's got great charisma. All right? That won't reduce any debt. And then somebody said, he shows great leadership. What kind of leadership can you get out of someone standing on a stage answering a few questions? In other words, he's kind of handsome and he talks real pretty. So therefore, I'm going to vote for him. I tell you, not much has changed for a great many voters in this country in the last couple of 100 years. You go all the way back to before we had really mainstream media and sloganeering like, Tippecanoe and Tyler too. That type of thing won an election because it was memorable and it stayed in people's heads. Unfortunately, as I say, in the television age, you get a lot more slickly produced candidates, and they often walk away with these things. Not always for the betterment of the country. We just jumped 2 degrees. We're at 34. We just dropped back a degree. It's like watching a ping pong match here with the temperature. We've got Dr. Jonathan Tripp or one of his associates coming up just after 8:30 this morning, and Lieutenant Colonel Steve Heil just after 9 o'clock news. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on KLIX. Story today on the AP Wire, and it's been picked up by most of the newspapers across the state of Idaho. Now, a lot of these candidates, I give them credit, they're bilingual. You've got Jeb Bush, fluent in Spanish. You've got Rubio, fluent in Spanish. His parents are from Cuba. Ted Cruz, fluent in Spanish. His father is from Cuba. You might even have a few more in there who are very fluent in various languages, which is a great thing when you're campaigning for the office of president. You can reach a lot of people you might not otherwise reach. But can I tell you a quick little story here? English is not the official language of the United States. There is none. Some states have made the effort to try and establish an official language, and usually what happens is the local newspaper editors immediately start insulting and calling whoever sponsors such a bill a bigot. I read the other day where there are nearly 200 languages being spoken in some American metropolitan areas today. If you go to Los Angeles, for instance, languages like Tagalog. Now, not a lot of people around the world speak that. Now, we'd like to think that a lot of these people will assimilate. I'll tell you a little quick story here. When I was a young guy working in radio, I was working in a city very comparable to Twin Falls, about the same size at the time. It's smaller now. Twin Falls has gotten bigger, but that's because that city is in a high-tax state. But I can remember I was reading one day in the obituaries, and it caught my attention because it was someone who was 103 years old, and he had only lived a couple of blocks away from me. And it mentioned he came to the United States when he was about 20, from Italy. And then he worked in a factory for many, many years and retired from the factory, and then lived with family and tended his garden in the backyard, just a couple of blocks away, as I say, from where I lived. And it mentioned he'd never learned English. He spoke exclusively Italian at work and at home. He got by for 80 years in America because family and friends at work, and sometimes there were people even at work, even in supervisory roles, who also had Italian ancestry and could speak directly with him. That's fine. And yet he didn't need to know any other language because his social outings were to the local Sons of Italy club, and you had a lot of people in that part of town who were still capable of speaking Italian. So he could get by living in that somewhat cloistered environment that he had in his neighborhood. But I will say this. I think it is important for most people when you're coming to this country, if you really want to succeed, and since we don't have factories anymore that will hire you no matter what language you speak, most of those factories are in places around the world where they speak other languages. You need some proficiency in English, at least for the next few generations, so that you can actually have more opportunities. Now, I'm telling you this for a reason. Story says that workers' compensation here in Idaho, they're under they're under the microscope and facing a potential lawsuit, or it is a lawsuit by now. The reason that is taking place is because a woman from Pocatello who spoke nothing but Spanish called the office, and she couldn't find anybody on the line who didn't speak anything but English. So the argument is, well, the office said to her, you got to find a translator. Go pay for one or find someone who can translate for you. Maybe a relative, a friend, a neighbor, someone who could take care of this. And her argument is, I'm not supposed to be paying for a translator. You've got to pay for it for me. So now state taxpayers, and this will be a settlement. I don't think it'll actually go it'll be settled outside. Someone in state government will say, okay, we'll hire some people who are bilingual and speak Spanish and put them in the office. However, if they're speaking 157 languages in metropolitan Los Angeles, pretty dang soon we'll be having people all over Idaho who are speaking, 80, 100 languages. How many more translators can the state afford? Now, Lefty says, it's the right thing to do. We can't hurt their feelings and force them to speak English because English isn't the official language, and if it was, it would be mean. It would hurt their feelings and make them sad. So Lefty says, we've got to have all of these people. And then you go to Lefty and say, all right, if we hire 180 translators who can translate all of these various languages, who's going to pay for it? And Lefty will just say, it would be mean if we don't. Yeah, but who's going to pay for it? It would be mean if we don't. Yeah, but where's the money coming from? You're mean. Lefty doesn't have an answer for that. We have a telephone caller joining us. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Coming up on 826, it's 34. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And you're next. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. You bring up an interesting topic. And, my grandfather came over here in 1903 when the Fabian Socialists had destroyed the European economy, and he had to have good health, had to have a sponsor, and he didn't speak any English, and he didn't demand a translator or anything like that. Unfortunately, of course, he went into a German community, but, eventually he learned English and did very well, and so forth. But, you take like the state of Michigan now, you punch 3 for Arabic.
Yeah.
And, so how many more punches are we going to get? Which is going to be the next one down the line? And but it's interesting in Michigan, and I checked this out. I called the number, and they don't tell you that 3 is for Arabic, but I'm sure all the Muslims up there know that because when I punch 3, you get Arabic. And so unofficially, they're trying to hide it, but we're paying all these welfare benefits to these people that come in here and don't assimilate and expect us to pay for everything.
And we'll see more and more of it, and the costs will go up in a country already overburdened. The former leader of the Government Accounting Office said the other day the actual federal debt is $65 trillion. And I hear some people say it's even double that. It's an absolute shame. I thank you much for the telephone call, and that means even state governments are going to be called on to try to pick up a share of that. Plus, state governments already have all of these liabilities for retiree pensions and health benefits. It's 827. We have another caller with us. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Yeah, I was listening to some of the debate last night, and like the previous caller brought up before about the conversations that we're having about the multi-language. I feel that after watching that debate, you put in Rubio or Ted Cruz as the president, you better put in Donald Trump as VP, because you need that almost bully style figure to protect Ted Cruz and Rubio from all the crap, along with having a president or a vice president with that much knowledge in business and money management backing him. That's the only way we're going to get out of this.
Yeah, and I thank you for the call. I'll tell you what, I think that in that situation, Donald Trump would definitely be a guy who would be able to go out and face media and run interference for a president in that situation, and he would put them quite quickly in their place, as we have seen him do over the last several months. It's 33. Coming up on 8:30, and of course, Dr. Jonathan Tripp scheduled to join us in just a few minutes, or one of his associates from Tripp Family Medicine. Do want to remind you, I was mentioning the other day, I have a freezer filled with meat at home, and if you are looking to do the same thing and you want to process something that's rather fresh, well, if it's too fresh, you got to slap it, I guess, right? High Desert Meat Processing processes one animal at a time. What you bring in is what you get back. Darren Van Horn is the owner of High Desert Meat Processing in Twin Falls. He's got over 30 years in the business. Visit High Desert Meat Processing on Facebook, and you can read the reviews of other customers, or give High Desert Meat Processing a call for all of your wild game and domestic processing needs, 734-9949. High Desert Meat does in-house smoking. Nothing is shipped out. Specialty meats, brats, Polish dogs, hot dogs, kielbasa, summer sausage, salami, pepperoni, you name it, USDA approved. Darren works closely with local beef growers and their programs to ensure quality meat. The number is 734-9949.